All right, my friends, on this build show, we're gonna jump into one of my favorite topics, framing, and specifically Monopoly framing. You know, if you've watched any of my videos or seen me over the years, I've talked a lot about this topic. I built my own house with this style of framing called Monopoly framing. What I like about it is I'm using standard off-the-shelf materials. You know, I bought everything from the BFS local lumber yard, but we're putting it together in a very thoughtful and slightly different way to absolutely elevate the performance of the house. So with that being said, we're going to review 4 houses. We're also going to have a little bit of a walk back in time on this YouTube channel. A few of my OG Build Show subscribers will recognize some of these videos, but some of these may be brand new to you. Today's Build Show, Monopoly framing 4 ways. Let's get going. Okay, so first, before we get into Monopoly framing, let me show you where this concept came into my mind. This is not something I made up. I first heard Dr. Joe Stiebrick talk about the perfect wall, gosh, more than probably 15 years ago. He published a paper called The Perfect Wall. And if you look at this, I don't know what this is, 3 pages, let's say. This is available on buildingscience.com. Let's look at that wall section right there. He basically says, look, this wall that is standard framing, that's the gray area you're seeing on the right that says structure. If that framing is kept dry and kept at the same temperature and humidity as the rest of the house, really that framing could last hundreds of years. You know, think about this, maybe not this table, but your dining room table. Maybe you inherited your dining room table from your great-grandfather who made that dining room table. And as long as it's sitting in your dining room, that table could really, in theory, last forever. Now, our houses are made of wood, typically in America, at least a majority of them. If our houses are treated the same as that dining room table, there's no reason why our houses couldn't last 500 years. Okay, so we look at that line right there, that black line on this drawing. This is our control layers. What are we controlling? We're controlling water, whether it's rainfall or whether that's sprinklers or wherever that water is coming. We got to control the water to make sure that wood framing doesn't get wet. The next thing we need to control is air. We do not want air leaking through our wood frame buildings because very likely if that air is leaking through, it's going to find a condensing surface and it's going to deposit moisture on our walls. So that's a form of water too, really. Air is just as important as water management. Next, we're going to control vapor. We want to be cautious about vapor flowing through our buildings because, again, it could find a condensing surface. And lastly, we need to control temperature, right? If it's cold out, I need to put a jacket on to control my temperature. And that jacket makes a lot more sense on the outside of the house than trying to stuff that insulation between my ribs. And then outboard of that is all the things that make our house pretty, the cladding. I love this particular drawing that Joe did because it shows the breaks in that cladding. Our cladding doesn't really need to be perfectly watertight. It's like that trench coat that your grandpa wore. It sheds most of the water, right? But some might get in, and that's okay because there's an air gap behind that. We'll get into that later. But the biggest thing that cladding's doing, besides shedding the majority of the water, is it's also keeping the UV rays off of all those control layers which are behind it. Seems like a simple concept, but it took me a while to really think about it. And the other interesting thing about this article and this concept is the perfect wall, if you drop it down one way, is basically the perfect slab or the perfect subfloor. And move it the other way and it's the perfect roof. The control layers are exactly the same. Now, I heard Joe talk about this for several years before I said, you know what, there's got to be a way that we could build a house like this. And at the time, my business partner, Eric Rouser, who's an architect, came up with this design with his wife, Rebecca. Let's watch a second or two, a few minutes of this video. This will actually be kind of fun because you'll hear what my videos looked like 10 years ago. And this is the very first house I did with this perfect wall concept that now I've kind of coined Monopoly framing.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Reisinger with Reisinger Homes. Welcome to my video blog dedicated to building science and fine craftsmanship. I've got a really...
That was my old intro. I used that for many, many years. You know, I started this YouTube channel in 2008, and this was published around 2014-ish, something like that. But look at that house behind me. It's basically a big blue box. We used a full Carlisle peel and stick on this particular project. I've moved on to some other products since then. But if you look at the framing here, the framing on this house is traditional framing. There's nothing special here. We basically framed it with standard 2x, and then we sheathed the outside of the house with OSB. Now we did do one trick I'm going to show you in a little bit to make the inside look pretty so you wouldn't see the OSB. But that house, when I finished at this stage, I thought, gosh, it really looks like a Monopoly piece, doesn't it? Remember those old green Monopoly pieces? Although, funny enough, in my mind, they didn't have overhangs, and that's kind of what I thought of this house. Now here's the beauty of that shape. This allows us to go from foundation to the ridge and all the way back down with that control layer, that peel and stick. And in this case, that peel and stick for us is an amazing water barrier. It's an amazing air control layer because it's stuck to the outside of the house. It also, in this case, is a zero perm. It's basically a vapor barrier. So once that gets peel and stuck, if that's a correct term, on the entire outside of the house, now we basically have a perfect control layer. Now the inside of the house looks like this on this particular house. I'll show you later on how we finished it. But basically we said, okay, well, if we don't have any insulation on the inside, we're going to put all those control layers, especially the thermal control layer on the outside. We should probably pay attention to how we frame it so it looks kind of cool. We kind of wanted to look like a, an old beach house or maybe a house that had gotten remodeled. Now let's fast forward another, I don't know, 2 or 3 years to where the house is done, and let's see what the house looks like now that we're moved on.
500 years. On today's episode, I'm going to give you a tour of this house that we built with standard materials and standard processes, but in a different way that's going to help it last for generations.
So what you're seeing now is on the outside of the box. Let me see if I can actually find a slightly better image of the whole house. There we go. We didn't have overhangs on the gables. I think in hindsight, I wish I would have probably put a awning on those 2 gable windows. We put a big box gutter on. You're seeing that on the base there. But we also put some giant porches on. So the front porch, the side porch, those have a giant overhang to really shed the water from the outside of the house. We put a full metal skin on the outside. I'm a big fan of metal roofing and metal siding in this case too. Nothing to paint. Still looks like the day I built it here, more than a decade later. And now let's take a look at the inside. Funny enough, I didn't say welcome to my video blog on this video, even just, this is now 7 years ago. And let's look at the next video. Right around that same period of time, I started shooting videos with a more professional crew. So check out this intro that I had for a while here. This is kind of fun.
Wall system for a house, what it is, and a few reasons why I like it.
Look at this fancy intro. Man, that's cool. My buddy Rocky, who's a filmmaker, helped me, did this really, really cool intro. And I really credit Rocky for the growth of the channel starting around this period, 7, 8, 9 years ago. But I want to forward to the inside of the house here. In a second, I'm going to go inside, because I think that the inside's really, really cool in this house. I'm going to turn the volume down so you can hear me rather than my old voice. But look how we did the framing. We did it in a pretty way. We didn't use inside insulation because I met code with my exterior insulation. So we simply painted the inside of the house with kind of a whitewash. And here's the wall section that you're seeing there. Oops, sorry, let me back up a second, pause on that. I think Eric made this drawing for us. 2x4 framing. On top of the 2x4 to get that pretty look on the inside, we did some 1x4s horizontally. Then we sheathed it in OSB. Then we used a peel and stick. 2 layers of exterior insulation or outsulation, nothing on the inside. A rain screen batten, a 1x4, and then that metal cladding. And the roof and the wall are basically the exact same. And you can see here on a side view in process, we did a little thicker roof insulation to meet code. I forget the exact R value that we did at the time. It's probably 20 something, let's say, on the roof. But remember, it's totally continuous. There's no breaks in that whatsoever. And on the walls, we also tried to reduce thermal bridging as much as possible. You can see that C channel that's going to form the porch roof over there. We put some weld brackets on and bolted those to the house, water and airproof them, and then welded that C channel to it so we could have as much continuous insulation as possible on the outside of the house. I want to say there's probably a few more interior shots of the house. It might actually be in this video. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. Go back and watch these. I'll put a link to these videos in the description if you want to rewatch these. Gorgeous house. We spent a fair amount of time really framing it pretty, but what's interesting is there's really nothing special about any of the framing. Maybe the most expensive piece of framing on this was some glue lambs. We used standard solid 2x headers, standard 2x4 SPF everywhere, but by doing everything on the outside, it just made for such a cool project. Now the one downside of this house, I don't have some great images of this, but the crawl space, we did a ventilated crawl space, and I sprayed closed cell foam up underneath the floor, like where, I think that's Christoph Irwin and Eric there, where they're standing. The floor, the subfloor, was 2x6 car deck. Well, if you're not familiar with the term, it's basically a double tongue and groove 2x6 that we nailed down onto the floor joist, just standard floor joist, and then we use closed cell foam there. Our blower door score was not great in this house. It was like 1 point something, 1.2 I want to say, 1.3. So we were nowhere near passive house levels. And I think that most of the leakage, if I would have tested at the time, which I didn't have great tools 10 years ago, but I have better tools today, I suspect most of the leakage was from the crawl space to the house. The rest of the house was very tight. I also used a real basic window and door package. This was kind of an off-the-shelf door system, and I don't want to get into that. No need to bash any manufacturers here, but I think my windows and doors were also relatively leaky. So I would do a few things different on this house. Let's fast forward now to my next house that I did with Monopoly framing, which really took me, I don't know, 6 or so years later to do, and that's my personal house. So this is me on my roof now. And I'm going to fast forward in the video here to show you an image that's kind of the iconic Monopoly framing image. There it is. So now instead of OSB and peel and stick, I did zip system sheathing. And the beauty of that was that once the framers went around the house, we were done. We didn't have to come back with a primer and then a peel and stick. Is one better than the other? Well, that's for you to decide. I do really like the zip system sheathing. I like how the fluid applied products stick really nicely to that green zip system. So here's my house at this stage, but when I built my house, I didn't want this real modern look like the last house was. I was looking for a very traditional look. Like if you look at the finished photos of my house, you'll see that my house looks real traditional. You can't tell that this is underneath here. So then if we keep going on the video, from the Monopoly framing, we had to figure out how to make this overhang and how to make the house look a little bit more traditional, because I didn't want that Monopoly piece look for my house. Now on the pop-up that you're seeing there, we did a slightly different detail because I was looking for a thin overhang in that particular space. But let's go over and check out the regular portion of the overhang once I did that pop-up, and that's going to be right here. What I did was we took LVLs, 2x4 LVLs, actually framed the house out of LVLs, so these are leftover LVLs, and we cut them to an L shape. And here's why I did that. When we screwed those down with some long SPAC screws into the rafters below, I wanted the first layer of insulation to be flush with the bottom part of the L, the lowered portion of that LVL. And then as I put a second layer on, you're going to see that in a second here, then, like if you look behind me there, that insulation is in between those rafter tails that I made. The second layer went over top, so I really had a very continuous insulation. And then after that, I came through and put another layer of sheathing on top of the roof. So here's one of the guys on the rooftop now, finishing that insulation on the lower portion. This is actually my master bedroom right below him there. And then when he's done, we had to put a whole nother layer of zip system sheathing on top of that. So here you can see those LVLs. We made them all in one big stretch, you know, and kind of made a workshop. Screwed those into the rafters, put the 2 layers of insulation down, and then eventually put that second layer of zip down. The problem with this detail, or not the problem, but there was a fair amount of, I don't know what the right term is, kind of extra craftsmanship, frankly extra time, extra framer time, that went into it. Now, my frame carpenters worked with me a long time, and I do most everything with them on basically a time and material or cost plus type bid. So he wasn't worried about bidding the house and losing money. He knew that he was basically doing it time and materials, which made sense to me because I didn't know how long it was going to take, and neither did he, and I didn't want him taking a guess on how long it would take to do this. Now here you can see the second layer of zip system sheathing went on, and now it's going on top of the insulation, and then now you can see that overhang formed. Once those tails were sticking out, we nailed on the outside a barge rafter, basically a 2x to connect all those. And if you look at my house now, I've got all closed soffits on the outside. You have no idea that it's not framed traditionally with rafters poking through that air barrier, but in fact, everything's flush going through. The expensive part, or relatively expensive part, was this right here. To screw all that down, we had to figure out where the rafters were, and then that last layer of zip system sheathing, we used that long Spax power lag all the way down into the rafters. And then I had to come back with tape and tape every single one of those to make sure that I wasn't getting water in there until my final roof got put on. Amazing performance, looks fabulous. I've had zero problems with the house. But when I got done, I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this that would be a little less expensive and would give me just the same performance. So then the next house, which I did, which is frankly right after this, you can see it's a year later or right around that same time, frankly, is this one. You're looking at it now after that roof's done, but let's rewind time for a second. Actually, first, let me show you my analogy here. I kind of like this analogy. 6 degrees. So before I left for the job site, the first thing I did was I grabbed my big puffy jacket. Now, why don't we think about puffy jackets for our houses for a minute? When we think about our houses, most of the time we're just stuffing insulation in between our framing. But that puffy jacket for a house, that's our exterior insulation. On this house behind me, believe it or not, I've got a big puffy jacket on this house. Quite a bit on the roof, a little bit on the walls. Today's build show all about... Okay, so I already showed some of the details in this quick intro clip, but Monopoly framing, again, we clip the rafters on the outside of the house. That's really this image that you're seeing here. What you're seeing is the roof rafters coming down, the zip R sheathing coming up and stopping at that wall to roof connection, so that then I can put zip system roof sheathing on and tape that. And then on top of that, we put a 2-inch layer of foam, and that's what you're seeing here. Same exact rafter detail coming out, but I did go to a different system above that, and we're about to show you that right now. You'd notice that I have a big puffy jacket on top of the roof, and I have some exterior. So at this point, it really looks the same as my house. This is that zip R insulation that has sheathing and insulation. Let me go to the next layer though. Rafters at the wall, and then we ran the sheathing from the wall. I love that video image. That I think I got that from the ladder. Boy, that is fantastic. It really tells the story of that Monopoly framing. You can see those rafters are clipped. The wall sheathing goes up and stops where the roof sheathing is going to come down. This is probably the first job I'd done with Zip R. This happened to be R3, but it makes that good thermal break. And then what I was trying to show you actually was the hunter panels that we used. I'd never used those hunter panels before. That's not true. I did do a hunter panel job one time, but here's what they look like. Where there's not a block in there. And I didn't get any videos of the hunter panels. You're looking at a side view here, but basically what a hunter panel is it's foam. Actually, let me use my cursor here. Foam with a spacer block with an airspace, and then another layer of, in this case, 1/2-inch plywood. So first layer of foam, second layer of foam that includes the hunter panel goes down, and now I've got 2 layers of foam with an airspace above the foam. Pay attention to that, because we're gonna, on the next house, we're gonna run with that. And then another layer of plywood. I can't remember honestly how much those hunter panels were. They're not inexpensive. They're certainly more expensive than a Zip R product, let's say. But the fact that it had integrated ventilation, and that ventilation cavity meant that I didn't need to vent on top of the roof. I was vented under the roof. I really like that. Now, because it wasn't zip, I went with another layer of underlayment. And I'm a big fan of the peel and stick shark skins underlayments. That's the Ultra SA. Man, that's a great product. I really, really like it. So that then went down, and then I could do my metal roof on top. But the point was, this house, oh, there's the Hunter panels. I was looking for that wider shot. You can see they get delivered in a big bundle. Everything's bonded already, all three of those layers, foam, spacer block, and then plywood. One cool thing about it, which I don't think you can see from this image, is there is on top of that Hunter panel spray paint marks where those spacer blocks are, so you know where you can sink a screw. And I think we used a more standard screw rather than like a lag type screw, those spacks that I used on the last one. So that also saved us a little bit of money. And there's actually a good image of those Hunter panels going down. I wish I would have flown the drone during that time. I can't remember why I didn't. But here's a good image of them putting those on. I really like that. I think that it went quite fast. But again, we have this kind of extra material cost and extra something different that we have to acquire. And no disrespect to Hunter, I do like that. But as I did my most recent project, let's look at the way we did this one. This is the Reisinger build project. If you've followed the videos, you probably know this already, but I'm gonna key in just specifically on this over roof detail here. And you can go back, of course, and watch the whole episode. But what you're seeing here is Monopoly framing. Actually, let me fast forward. I'll show it to you right here. Look at my funny outfit that I had on a super hot day in Austin. I think it was 104 that day and sunny. So I put my cool sweatshirt on rather than my normal. So here we go. Monopoly framing. This time just 2 layers of regular foam on top. That's that Atlas rooftop foam. It's got a glass reinforced fiber facing on top of that, so it's not slippery at all. It's not foil face too. And so Monopoly framing, 2 layers of foam for ventilation in the over roof. Instead of cutting those L's that kind of took some time, we decided to go with a standard 2x4 hanging out 2 feet and coming up the roof 8 feet. I'm going to pause right here because this makes a lot of sense. This is on the back of the house now, and you can see that now we've got a ventilation channel that's going to go all the way up to the top of the roof. A little bit tricky on the overhangs to form those, so let me kind of talk you through what we did on those overhangs. Actually, you know what? I've got a photo here. Let's cut to the photo. There we go. So on the overhangs, what we did was we went in 4 feet horizontally and then out 2 feet, lagged those into the rafters. Now this time I did use standard trusses from Builder's First Source. That also was a good budget detail to kind of cut down on the cost compared to a hand-cut roof. You're also going to notice that all those 2x4s aren't touching each other. We left at least a 2-inch gap, maybe a little hard to tell on this photo, but I wanted to get airflow into that space on the gable side. So we left a 2-inch gap between, let's say, the vertical 2x and that horizontal coming through there. Also in the front of the house, if I put my cursor right there, you can see those are also gapped. So now ventilation that comes through the roof, or through the vented hardy soffit rather, is going to be able to make its way all the way to the ridge. And then you'll notice the ridge, those rafters are, or pardon me, those 2x rather, are about 2 or 3 inches shy, so that my standard ridge vent works. Now we did layer another layer of zip on here, but it was super straightforward. We were able to just nail that layer on rather than my house where we had to spend a lot of time screwing it. Just standard ring shank nails. And one area where I didn't have great venting was right here. This is the front porch on the house where we gapped those 2x so that we'd have some horizontal ventilation, but I didn't have a head wall vent. There might be a way to do that. I couldn't quite figure it out. If you guys can think of something or know of a product, put that link in the comments section below. I'd appreciate that. But I do want to show you how we formed the overhang. This is just showing that we gapped that zip on the top so we'd have a ventilation exit spot. And here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. So this is that barge rafter, basically just a 2x that we put on there. And we also cut, see how we notched these? We notched these out so that we'd have airflow through into that space. because we put solid blocking on there to keep everything nice and tight. And after we did that, I thought, oh shoot, we're gonna block out that airflow. So we notched each one of those. All we did was cut a curve cut down, or maybe a 2-inch cut, knocked it out with a hammer, and that's all hidden in that system. This fascia board is a plumb cut on that right there, and then we tied it back with a ledger 2x4. So there's that ledger board that's really just nailed through the zip R into the framing beyond. And then that's what's going to end up forming my flat soffit. So this is kind of an in-process shot. Well, there you have it, guys. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I did want to make mention that this went incredibly fast. Between my ready frame package that we framed the house, my truss package, and then doing this kind of standard 2x on the flat, I really like this. If I do a house again, the only thing that I might do differently is I think I might bump up my exterior insulation, and of course I would recommend that if you're in a really cold climate too. I believe we were R22 on the rooftop. Each one of those Atlas panels was R11 or R12 maybe. So we're like 22 to 24, let's say, on the rooftop. You know what we could do, frankly, is go to R36 on the rooftop, or maybe even R48 on the rooftop. Do the same method and not do anything in the inside cavity. That would really take us back full circle to Joe Stebrick's perfect wall. If we go back to Joe's wall section right here, the perfect wall for residential, 2x framing, cavity insulation, all my control layers on the outside, for sure some type of exterior insulation. My roof really qualifies for that because we did such a high value of insulation there. The zip R, depending on your climate zone, you're going to want to make that thicker so that you don't have any chance of condensation inside the walls. And then you're cladding right there in an air gap, and boom. Now we've got a house that in theory could last 500 years. And set your windows, buy a good window product like we use Pell on there. I've been real happy with those. Set them with best practice methods, making sure that it's a water managed system. You know, you'll notice on all of these houses recently, especially my house, we really paid attention to overhangs. On second stories where we had a 2-story wall and we had a punched opening on the first floor, we did some additional protection like at my house with awnings. But if you do that, you're going to build a house that really could legitimately last 500 years. Guys, big thanks to all of my friends out there that helped me turn Joe's thought about perfect wall into a few houses. I know lots of other builders are doing this as well. But I wanted to show you these 4 houses. If you're not currently a subscriber, guys, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content here every Tuesday and every Friday. And oh, by the way, over on thebuildshow.com, we publish about 13 new videos a week on high performance, on healthy, on durability. We also have 4 tradespeople shooting videos out at their job sites, teaching the trades. So we got a really good thing going here in the Build Show. And for those of you that were the OG subscribers that recognized my intro from 10 years ago, thank you for all your support over the years. We had a big milestone this past week, kind of coinciding with my 52nd birthday. Build Show Live in Austin happened, and it was a giant success. Stay tuned for some wrap-up videos to kind of see what you missed in Austin. And certainly sign up for updates on buildshowlive.com. We've got another conference scheduled for Dallas in October next year. With that being said, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.